Huomenta kaikille. Odotellaan vielä hetkiä. Lähdetään kohta liikenteeseen, kun viimeiset saapuu tuolta sisään. Niin tosi hyvä määrä ilmoittautuneita. Meillä on noin 70 ilmoittautunutta mukana, niin toivottavasti kaikki saapuu paikalle. Ja tietysti tallenne saadaan myös sitten jälkikäteen, niin jos haluaa sitten jakaa vaikka kollegalle myös, niin tallenne tosiaan tulee ja siellä sitten kaikki materiaalit saatavilla. Jos chattiin tulee sitten tuossa loppuvaiheessa kysymyksiä, niin luetaan nekin sitten mahdollisuuksien mukaan ääneen, jos on, niin kysymyksiä chatissa, niin saadaan nekin sitten tallenteille mukaan. Mutta ihan kohta tuossa aloitellaan, kun päästetään viimeiset sisään. Pistän sillä aikaa vielä, kun muut tulee tuosta, niin näytön jao päälle ja lähdetään sitten liikenteeseen. Niin sittenkö niin monta kilahdusta enää kuuluu, että alkaa tasoittumaan tuo osallistujamäärä, niin lähdetään sitten tuossa vaikka minuutin päästä liikenteeseen. No niin, lähdetään liikenteeseen. Siellä jotakin kautta muuten kiertää. Ehkä se nyt ei enää kierrä. Lähdetään liikenteeseen. Huomenta vaan kaikille ja tervetuloa mukaan tähän webinaariin, joka on yhteistyössä Jamfin kanssa järjestetty. Eli aiheena on mobiilitietoturva. Tosi tärkeää asiaa. Ollaan tässä kentällä enenevissä määrin huomattu, että tämä on semmoinen asia, joka kiinnostaa ja tietysti ollaan liikkuvassa työssä ja käytetään entistä enemmän meidän älylaitteita, mobiililaitteita työntekoonkin, niin siellä on aika sensitiivistäkin dataa, mitä käsitellään sitten puhelimessa, niin on tärkeää, että myös mobiilitietoturva on kunnossa. Meillä on tosiaan puhujia täällä, alan ammattilaisia. Minä tässä vedän muutaman aloituslaidin tähän alkuun ja tietenkin agenda näkyy tuossa, eli hetken kuluttua päästään sitten Adamin ääneen tuossa ja vaihdetaan sitten englannin kielelle ja sitten sen jälkeen Aki-Matti meiltä jatkaa hieman ja sitten lopussa otetaan tosiaan kysymykset. Ja voitte tosiaan kysymyksiä myös tässä webinaari edetessä kirjoittaa chattiin, niin otetaan niitä sieltä sitten esiin ja mahdollisuuksien mukaan vastataan suoraan tai sitten otetaan tuossa Q&A-osiossa lopussa sitten kysymykset ihan ääneen siellä. Mutta chatin kautta käsitellään kysymykset. Ja näiden puhujien lisäksi we also have Jonas from Jamfan. Maybe you could say a few words.
Of course. Good morning, everyone, and thanks a million for spending an hour with us this morning. I will not be active other than answering questions during the webinar, so please ask your questions in the chat, and if we can, I will answer them during the webinar, or else we will do it in the questions and answers in the end. So questions in the chat. Thank you so much, and back to Simon.
Yes, thank you. Kiitos. Ja tosiaan tämä ATEA ja Jamf-yhteistyö on ollut jo useamman, melkeinpä jo 10 vuotta kohta menossa ja me ollaan tosiaan korkeamman tason kumppaneita heidän kanssaan ja he tarjoavat tosiaan laadukkaita tietoturvaratkaisuja ja myös sitten laitehallintaratkaisuja tuonne Apple-maailmaan, mutta nämä tietoturvaratkaisut on sitten ihan mihin tahansa ekosysteemiin. Ja meillä on sitten sertifioitua osaamista tuossa näyte heidän Jamfin omalta partnersivustolta, mistä voi katsoa, että minkälaisia kumppaneita on olemassa, niin kerrotaan tästä ATEANkin osaamisesta. Ja sitten kun ollaan korkeamman tason kumppana, niin tietysti tarkoittaa sitä, että on sen osaamisen lisäksi myös kilpailukykyiset hinnat ja valmiita konsultointipaketteja. Vaikka tietoturvankin osalta niin pystytään tekemään kartoituksia ja katsomaan semmoinen vähän health check, että mikä meininki siellä on tällä hetkellä. Ja sitten jos hallintaakin liittyy siihen, niin sitäkin voidaan tietysti ottaa huomioon. Ja sitten tarvittaessa saadaan myös jatkuvana palveluna näitä kaikkia tuotteita, mitä Jamfinkin kautta löytyy sitten ja pystytään niissä sitten auttamaan. Ja sitten tietysti suora yhteys Jamfiin, se on tärkeää, että kun sitten tulee vähän hankalempia kysymyksiä tai tämmöisiä, niin saadaan sitten kaikista parhaimmat asiantuntijat sitten nopeasti lankojen päähän. And next I will hand it over to Adam and you can start showing your slides.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Humenta, I think
Good.
is my best pronunciation in Finnish, but unfortunately, yeah, the rest of the session from me will be in English. So I appreciate that, everyone listening along. But like we said, questions in the chat, we will answer them either throughout the presentation or at the end we will have some time for questions. So hopefully everything is visible now. I'm sure my colleagues at Atea will shout at me if it's not. So yeah, good morning. As I said, my name's Adam Boynton. We're going to be talking about something today that's fast becoming the front line of enterprise security, which is mobile and mobile devices. So before we begin, just to introduce myself briefly, I work on our security strategy here at Jamf. And my job simply is to make it as easy as possible for you and for our customers to get exposure and to utilize the entire Jamf portfolio. I'm obviously from the UK based on my accent, but I regularly travel to the Nordics as part of my role. I was actually in Helsinki last month, and the atmosphere was electric. There was military everywhere. There was cameras flashing, press crews on every street corner. So at first I thought that everyone had rolled out the red carpet for me, but it was also the same day that President Zelensky was in town. So it was still nice of you to coordinate our visits, but yeah, I'm looking forward to coming over and meeting some of you in person again in the not so distant future. So hopefully some of you are familiar with Jamf. I won't spend too long on our background. Today we serve over 75,000 customers across the globe with over 34 million devices using our platform. But we do work with organizations of all sizes. So we have some of the largest companies in the world using us, but we also have a very strong presence in smaller, medium-sized organizations across multiple different industries. So here's a stat to consider. Over 60% of enterprise endpoints are mobile. So we know that these days everyone has a mobile device. I think there's something like 14 billion mobile devices globally. They are being used and adopted in the enterprise at scale, but only about 10% of average security budget is focused on these devices compared to your typical machines that users use. So in the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to hopefully explore why mobile security is now a business critical topic. We'll share with you our perspective on the kind of threat landscape and how it's evolving. And then, of course, we're going to introduce how Jamf and Atea is helping organizations stay ahead of this. So I mentioned mobile work. Obviously, work has changed significantly, especially in the last 5 years. Remote work has seen a 4 times increase. Most workers do not sit behind a desk from Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 anymore. Yet when users are working, they're accessing company data. So if they're not sat behind a desk at a desktop or a laptop, yet they're always having access to your company data, how are they doing that? Well, most likely through a mobile device. I think these days I can probably do 90% of my job function entirely through my mobile device. So when I'm traveling, I can do everything through my phone or my tablet without really needing to get my laptop out of the bag most days. So we're accessing a lot of data through our mobile devices. A lot of organizations are embracing mobility. It is great for productivity, but it does potentially introduce a blind spot from a security point of view. Now, mobile devices are prime targets for attackers, mainly because we use them all the time. As I mentioned already, we have access to a lot of sensitive data from them. And generally, security awareness is slightly lower. So when we did a study of our customer data, we found just under 40% of mobile devices were running with known vulnerabilities. So this is where a user hasn't updated to the latest version of OS within an acceptable period of time, or maybe they haven't updated their applications correctly and there's vulnerabilities within an application also running on the device. We also know that mobile phishing is about 50% more effective than on a desktop laptop. So if a user gets an identical phishing attack sent to them via like an email, but also via SMS on the mobile device, they're twice as likely to click on the SMS link as they would do if it was a traditional phishing attack that they received on their desktop. And we'll come on to it in a bit more detail later, but we also know that these really sophisticated attacks where the attacker is trying to deploy spyware on an individual, the spyware loves mobile because it's the one device that we always have on us. So if someone's trying to spy on an individual, they're often going to use that mobile device as a way of doing that. So let's look at some recent and some maybe not so recent, but some trends that are also shaping the mobile landscape. So one of them sort of being last year, the Digital Markets Act in the European Union introduced third-party app stores to iOS devices. So third-party app stores have been around for Android for a significant period of time. Apple now have to allow app developers to distribute their applications outside the official app store. Now, why is that a security risk? Now, it isn't an immediate security threat if a user downloads applications from outside of these trusted app stores. But our research does show that if an application doesn't go through the same strict vetting process that it is required to do to be on the official Apple or Google Play stores, then there is a higher risk that the application is either malicious, or sometimes it's just the case that it hasn't been coded particularly well and data isn't handled in the most sensitive manner. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. It's something I'll talk about later in terms of like where users are downloading applications from and what these applications have access to. Another thing that you may have noticed for all our iOS users, there's been quite a few significant OS updates that have been pushed to your devices recently. So iOS 18.4, which was released at the end of March this year, this update alone had over 60 security vulnerabilities that were addressed and fixed. So obviously very great that Apple have identified them, but it does make it one of the most extensive security patches in recent times, and obviously highlights the importance of keeping users up to date. But then actually just 2 weeks after that, so on the 16th of April, iOS 18.4.1 was released, and this update had 2 actively exploited zero-day vulnerabilities. So actually since the beginning of the year, Apple has patched 5 actively exploited zero-day vulnerabilities, so including the 2 I mentioned above. So yeah, in just a short period of time, there's been significant focus from attackers on Apple devices, and of course Apple do a brilliant job at identifying and fixing them, but obviously something to definitely keep an eye on. Similar sort of story for Android. For Android, since the start of this year, there's been 169 vulnerabilities that have been addressed, and 4 active zero-day vulnerabilities that have been patched. So pretty similar, in probably slightly more vulnerabilities fixed from the Android side, but these zero-day vulnerabilities. So it really does highlight if Apple and Android are identifying these zero-day vulnerabilities, they're confirming that they've found evidence of exploit. Mobile devices are being targeted more than ever by these attackers. We also, if we look a bit more locally to Finland, so we know in May 2024, the Traficom, the Transport and Communications Agency, issued a warning about Android malware campaign, which was aimed at bank customers. So I'm sure some of you on this webinar maybe either saw this or maybe even received like a Finnish language text message asking you to call a service number, and then the users or the victims were asked to install a fake antivirus app, and this app was disguised as McAfee antivirus, but it was actually malware that was designed to steal banking credentials. So quite a convincing scam. In January 2022, the Finnish Ministry for Foreign Affairs reported that several diplomats' phones were infected with Pegasus spyware. We'll talk a little bit more about Pegasus later on, but this is spyware developed by NSO Group. It's a very sophisticated surveillance tool that can activate your phone's camera and microphone without the users knowing. And the Finnish Security and Intelligence Service indicated that it was a foreign state actor that was responsible for this espionage. And then another one in April 24, City of Helsinki's education division had a significant cyber attack. Now, this breach primarily exploited server vulnerabilities, but it does also underscore the risks associated with any unsecured endpoints, including mobile devices, when you do have access to quite sensitive data. So there are kind of 5 main common methods an attacker might use to try and compromise a device or leverage them for cyber attacks. So I mentioned earlier phishing or smishing, or even now quishing, which is QR code phishing. It's where attackers employ social engineering tactics to try and deceive users into clicking links or divulging sensitive information like their credentials. Malicious applications. So as I mentioned earlier, if you download an app from a trusted app store, you're not going to see malicious applications, or if indeed you do, it's very, very rare. But when what we see here is cyber criminals are trying to distribute apps embedded with malware through unofficial app stores or deceptive websites. And obviously, once these apps are installed, their intention is to try and exfiltrate data or monitor user activity. The third method is the exploitation of device vulnerabilities. So this is if a user is running on an outdated operating system or an unpatched application, there could be a vulnerability that an attacker can exploit, again, depending on the significance of that. Fourth one, compromised configuration profiles. So we have seen evidence where threat actors tried to deploy malicious config profiles to devices, which could potentially then alter the settings to redirect traffic through to a malicious server. And then the last one is network-based attacks. So this is if a user joins an unsecure Wi-Fi network, which could then expose the device to man-in-the-middle attacks. These are probably more rare these days than they were sort of 5-6 years ago. But yeah, these are the most common methods that we see. And mobile spyware also continues to evolve. So this is commercial grade spyware. It's often sold to governments, corporations, and bad actors. These are tools that are designed to exploit zero-day vulnerabilities to try and gain access to devices without user interaction. And once they are installed, their intention is to be able to intercept messages, track the GPS location of a user, hijack the camera and microphone, or extract sensitive data. And we'll explore this further later in the presentation. Now, appreciate the text is quite small here, but if you weren't motivated by the potential threats that we see on mobile, how about meeting compliance requirements? So there are a lot of compliance frameworks these days that are now including mobile devices as standard. So where I'm from in the UK, we have Cyber Essentials Plus, that now explicitly includes any mobile device that needs to meet these regulations. So we're starting to see a lot of compliance requirements that view mobile the same way you view your traditional desktops and laptops. So if you are looking to obviously make sure your devices are compliant and you have mobile devices that are accessing some form of sensitive data, it's likely that they're part of the scope for these frameworks now and something to consider. So hopefully you get it now. Hopefully I haven't scared you too much. And let's maybe look at what we can do about it. So first and foremost, it's really important to note that Apple and Android are responding. Okay, so I mentioned already you have the patches that Apple push through and have been pushing through regularly. Similar story with Android. But also built into iOS, you have the app sandbox and code signing. So each app, if it's downloaded from the trusted app store, as I mentioned, it runs in its own secure environment and must be signed by a verified developer. You have secure boot and system integrity. So iOS enforces a secure boot chain and runtime protection. So only trusted, unmodified Apple signed code can run on a device. There's hardware-based security within iOS, like the Secure Enclave, Face ID, on-device encryption. There's also features such as lockdown mode, which is a high security mode designed for users at risk of targeted attacks. And it drastically reduces the device's attack surfaces. Obviously, only use lockdown mode in extreme scenarios. And then rapid security response as well, delivers urgent security fixes independently of any kind of full OS update, although Apple haven't had to push some of these through in a while on iOS. Similar story on Android. Every Android app runs in its own sandbox with a unique user ID. The apps must be digitally signed, ensuring authenticity and isolation from other apps. Android enforces a verified boot process, so it uses cryptographic checks to ensure that only trusted OS versions and firmware are loaded at the startup. The Android Key Store uses hardware-backed security. So there's a lot of great features that are sort of built into these devices, but it does also highlight the challenge that you need to keep these your devices that you have out in the field using these features and making sure that they are enforcing any kind of built-in security or leveraging that. So where did Jamf come in? What makes Jamf quite unique, and we have this new offering which we will talk a little bit more about, and maybe we'll share. I think we are planning to share a little bit more about the commercials for this product, but it's a product called Jamf for Mobile. It's unique in the market in that it is providing four or three sort of main products with the option of a fourth if you're interested in one license. So we have device management functionality, we have mobile threat defense functionality, we also have ZTNA functionality, so zero trust network access functionality. Now, the first step is MDM. Now, this is what you should be doing, and I'm sure everyone on this webinar does this already. Maybe not for BYOD, so we will touch on BYOD. And also, as I mentioned, Jamf has MDM, but when we talk about MDM here, we fully integrate with Microsoft Intune and other MDM providers. So it doesn't matter if you're using an existing MDM solution for everything I'm about to show you on this webinar. We can integrate completely with those, but for us, it's just important that you have an MDM in place first and foremost. What that allows you to do is leverage the native security functionality that I mentioned. It allows you to enforce that devices are on a latest or minimum version of operating system that you're comfortable with or that is required to meet compliance. It gives you visibility into what's going on your devices, and also allows you to remediate risks. So MDM, by its nature, has more capabilities to do device remediation if indeed a threat is detected. So there's a couple of key MDM use cases. This is what you would see if you were a Jamf customer in terms of being able to push through software updates. Like I said, for us, you can do this with Microsoft Intune. You could also do this with another MDM solution, but with Jamf, obviously we give you the ability to automatically update your users' devices to a certain version of OS. So this is obviously pretty standard stuff. But yeah, just to kind of stress the point of how important this is. From a BYOD point of view, this is actually something that we do internally at Jamf. So I just have the one device that is my personal device, but I have enrolled it into Jamf Pro, and I could obviously do the same for other MDMs. With Apple devices, this is done for account-driven user enrollment. For Android devices, there are similar Android enterprise profiles that you can leverage to do this. Essentially what it does is it sets up a separate partition on my mobile device. So I have my work applications and email accounts entirely separate from my personal applications and email accounts. Similar, I guess, to like the old school containerization, but slightly different, slightly more modern approach to that. So what it means as a user is I can continue just using my one device. I have access to my company applications, but I also have the trust that my business or my company can't see what I'm doing on my personal device. What you can do to go one step further than that, and this is something I do, especially on iOS devices, I'm sure you can do similar on Android, is users can then start to leverage things like focus modes. where you can set a separate home screen for your business applications, separate notification settings for your business applications so that you only see them during work hours. So it's quite a nice sort of feature if you really wanted to go into leveraging the kind of stuff you can do from a BYOD point of view. But of course, yeah, this here is showing you how a user can install and access company applications on their BYOD device. But of course, it's all managed and configured correctly behind the scenes. So MDM is definitely an important first step. But beyond MDM, you then need to consider layering external security software that can quickly detect vulnerabilities within the OS or the apps. An MDM solution is not designed to do this. You do need additional software on top of the MDM solution. Once you've done that, you can start looking at setting up conditional access workflows for any devices that aren't compliant. And I will touch on that later on, but as a really kind of simple example, if the device is not running a certain version of OS, it cannot access company data until it is on the acceptable version. That is something that's very commonly implemented, very simple, very effective security, doesn't really interfere with how the user is using their devices, and it gives you that additional extra security overnight or within seconds. The other thing that any kind of mobile security software should be doing is protecting against the end user. So I mentioned all the brilliant on-device or native security functionality that Apple and Android build into their OS, but what they can't do is protect against user risk. So this might be clicking on links or scanning untrusted QR codes or joining insecure Wi-Fi networks. Yeah, that is something the MDM can't protect against, the native security features can't. That's where it's really important to have that additional security software. And then the balance, as always, is having that security in place, but not interfering with how the user is using their device. So maybe if I share with you a couple of examples of what Jamf do in this area. So I mentioned earlier about conditional access and compliance risk signaling. So here we have an iPad. The iPad device is considered a risk. It's got vulnerabilities associated with it. So the user here was not able to access, in this case, Dropbox, because the device risk was elevated. This is quite a basic example. You can customize the logo. You can put your logo here. You can also change the language to Finnish to make it even more user friendly. Couple of another thing to kind of look at is the vulnerability management. So again, if you want to keep a track of devices which are on certain versions of OS, you can do so. But also unique to Jamf, we have a vulnerability management report just exclusively for mobile devices, where you can identify any vulnerabilities within your estate, and they are given a scoring system based on whether they're a critical vulnerability or a high security vulnerability. So you can quickly identify and patch them. Often as well, from a compliance point of view, the requirement is that you have reporting in place, so that at least you know what vulnerabilities are present on your devices. So we give you that reporting straight away. And then from a user's point of view, they can see clearly on their device that the application showing them there is a vulnerable OS that they are running. And you can either just leave it to the user to update that version or enforce an update through MDM. Another thing we look at is the applications that users run. So if we are, so beyond vulnerabilities within operating systems, you can also sometimes see vulnerabilities within applications. So if a user has an application on their device which has known vulnerabilities associated with it, we'll be able to flag that to you. One of the most common examples of this was a vulnerability within WhatsApp. There's been a couple over the years where obviously WhatsApp's very popular as an application, and attackers look to try and exploit that application as a way to get onto the device through some method. So if indeed we do identify there's a version of an application running with known vulnerabilities, or indeed in a lot of cases there's a known CVE attached to that, we'll be able to tell you immediately, okay, this user has this version of the application installed on their device. We flagged it as being vulnerable. Whilst you're in there and you're looking around, you can also get insight into what permissions this application has, what URLs are embedded into the application. So if you wanted to do a full risk assessment, you can easily do so. A couple of other sort of nice features from a threat risk signaling point of view. So like I said, this is very much in line with potential conditional access workflows that you might want to implement. And by the way, the console you can see on screen here, this is what we call Jamf Security Cloud. So if you are an existing Jamf customer, but just for the MDM side, and you're interested in having a play around or testing of this functionality, we can give you access to a Security Cloud instance to be able to do so. But we can see here that this device is running a high risk, and indeed the application is showing that. What we can also do is send that risk signal to Microsoft conditional access policies, so you can build it into that workflow. So if a user wants to access Outlook and Jamf is identifying that device as being a high risk, they will not have access to it. Then we go on to web threat prevention. So here, this is where if a user clicks on a phishing link, we block them from accessing that. We do this through there's kind of a couple of methods. The most common method is we are acting as a device DNS resolver, but we also, on Apple devices, we can leverage some native frameworks and do on-device content filtering. But the DNS method is also incredibly sort of privacy focused for an end user. We also provide protection against public Wi-Fi. So if a user joins a Wi-Fi network which has indeed been identified as a security risk, they'll get a notification the second they join that network, which maybe will encourage them to disconnect, or indeed if they do have VPNs or anything like that, they can fire them up. And then another thing we can do is this continuous conditional access. So here we have a device which at this current state is considered healthy. I think the video is not going to play for me there. But essentially what we can do is, the way in which we do our conditional access and reporting, if at one point we consider the device to be a secure and healthy device, the user can access the application, the business application that they're attempted to access. If during that period their device risk suddenly elevates, so maybe they've closed down the business app, they've then downloaded an application from an untrusted app store, or they've joined an insecure Wi-Fi network, the next time they go to access the business application, they'll be denied access because the risk reporting is done in real time. So there's a lot of, like I said, we integrate fully with Microsoft Intune. You might be considering looking at Microsoft Defender. I don't necessarily like to downplay other solutions in too much detail, so I won't sort of dwell on this too much. But there are a number of gaps in Microsoft Defender's offering on mobile devices that I would encourage you to consider and do your own research for. And of course, we can help you with any kind of comparison if you are considering Defender or have Defender in place already. So we'll come back to these more sophisticated attacks. So what can we do about them? How prevalent are they? These are the kind of type of attacks that we see get a lot of press. Now, the reality is attacks like Pegasus cost millions of dollars. So it's very unlikely that a mobile security software that I've just been showing, which doesn't cost a lot of money, is quite a high value but low expenditure for the security software. But is it going to stop an attacker who's spending? Pegasus recently was sold for $20 million. Possibly not. So we need to consider sort of alternative protection if indeed you have users that could be targeted with these types of attacks. Now, there have been a number of governments close to Finland that have confirmed the use of Pegasus in some form or another. So in 2019, Estonia gained access to Pegasus spyware, reportedly deployed it outside its borders. Citizen Lab reported the use of Pegasus in Latvia as early as 2018, but also found evidence that it was continued to be used in 2023. Poland, the Polish Prime Minister recently came out and said the previous regime were actively using Pegasus against opposition, both in and out of the country. So we do see a lot of governments using this type of software to target individuals. If you do work in that space, it might be something you want to consider. We are also starting to see more enterprises using this, and there was another mobile security firm called iVerify that they detected Pegasus spyware on 11 out of 18,000 scanned devices. So that was a approximate of 1.5 infections per 1,000 devices. Now, that rate is notably higher than previously reported figures, and our evidence suggests it's not quite as common as that, but it is common, or it is becoming more common, I should say. And the reason why is if an attacker wants to compromise an individual, they'll always go after their mobile device. If they were trying to compromise your business, they'll attack the wider infrastructure. But if they want to compromise an individual, they'll go after their mobile device. Now, outside of those 5 methods that I mentioned earlier, how could an attacker infect a user's device? One of the ways is if they get physical hold of the device. This is an example. Obviously, we're all familiar with airport-style security. We had an instance where one of our customers' users went to visit. He was a lawyer working on a case. He went to visit the opposition for his particular client, and as part of the security, before he could enter the building, he was required to hand over his devices to go through an airport-style security. Now, this is not uncommon. I sometimes myself have had to do this when I go to visit customers' offices. The only thing that was uncommon was the user noted that when he did this, it took about 10 minutes before he got his devices back. And what potentially happened during those 10 minutes is because they had physical hold of the device, they were able to somehow brute force their way onto the device. And there's sometimes you can do that if the user's got a real simple passcode. Sometimes there are devices which could be could give the attacker. We don't necessarily know the ins and outs of how they got onto it, but just by having physical hold of the device was enough for them to in this instance to infect the device. And luckily, the user was able to come to us soon after the meeting, and we found exactly on that time that he handed his device that some activity was detected, and the actual risk wasn't exposed. Another scenario, so obviously, if you don't actually have your hand your user over to an attacker, but maybe your users don't operate in the most secure method. So let's say your user has just had a really successful business meeting, they're traveling back, they're sat in the airport lounge and they fall asleep and they leave their devices on the table, which you see all the time. And actually, to give you my own anecdote, this is actually a picture I took at Amsterdam airport just a few months ago. The gentleman next to me had left his seat and he'd gone to the bar to get a new drink. He'd left his device on the table and he'd even left it unlocked. So I could have quite easily, if obviously I was this way inclined, tried to get onto the device. Now, if an attacker does get onto the device, there is what might they be trying to do? Now, I must stress this video that I'm showing you here is done by our own internal Threat Labs team. It's on a controlled environment. The device is running an outdated version of OS, and it's the device has been jailbroken as well. So this is not a demonstration to kind of show you a typical attack. The intention for the demonstration is to show you why an attacker is trying to target a mobile phone, and it's often because they want to use the device as spyware. If we think about it, we take our phones everywhere we go. So if your CEO or your board members are potentially a target for these type of attacks, they're most likely going to take their phone with them when they go to sensitive meetings. They're most likely going to take their phone with them at all times. It's always in your pocket. So if an attacker has the ability to access the camera and microphone remotely, that's incredibly valuable to an attacker. So often that is what they're trying to do with these type of spyware. So what can you do about it? As I mentioned, we have a product called Jamf Executive Threat Protection. The intention with this product, and it has a proven track record at being able to detect known indicators of compromise associated with Pegasus, but also we have our own proprietary behavioral analytics that analyzes data from a device to be able to identify potential zero-day attacks and zero-day vulnerabilities. But effectively, it will tell you if a device has been compromised, what that compromise looks like, and when and how it took place. We have an end user application that the user can also have running on their device that will do scanning as frequently as required. So it can operate in the background. The user doesn't have to initiate it, but if indeed they do are sort of paranoid, they have this application which, from a click of the button and within sort of 30 seconds to a minute, will extract data from a deep level. So what we're looking at here is data from a system and kernel level. So system diagnostics, crash files, file list, etc. are all sort of analyzed as part of this investigation. And then once it's going back to the admin console, if we do identify that a device has been attacked, we'll give you a lot of data into sort of ascertaining what that attack looks like and how you need to remediate it if indeed you do. We're also building out for this product integration to SIEM solutions. So if you are interested in sort of doing a bit of threat hunting on a mobile device, this is going to enable you to have that capability and functionality. So what, and I guess to wrap this up, I always do like to finish with a picture of my house, but obviously this isn't my house, but bear with me on this analogy. So the first step for mobile security, think of mobile security as if you were building a house from scratch. So if you're building a house from scratch, you're going to probably make sure that you have a secure door from a security point of view, and that the foundations are secure. You're going to build the house out of bricks. That is what MDM is doing, right? It's that first step. Then for additional security, you're probably going to put a lock on that front door. You're probably going to put a gate around your house. In this instance, barbed wire. Maybe you get a guard dog as well. That is what a mobile security or mobile threat defense solution is doing. It's about preventing an attacker from trying to get onto the device. Now, for most individuals, that is what you need from a security point of view, for both your house and for your device. You need locks on your door, you need locks in your windows, maybe a gate around the house. It's going to prevent most attackers from trying to get in. Same for mobile. You need it enrolled into MDM. You need mobile security software that stops most attacks. Now, why would you need something like Jamf Executive Threat Protection? Well, going back to the house analogy, you might also, if you have an expensive art collection, or you are indeed a senior politician, you probably have an alarm system. So if someone gets onto your house, if I'm a nation state, I'm not going to be put off by a lock on the front door and a gate. I'll probably find another way onto your house. I could tunnel in underground. I could parachute through the roof if I really wanted to. Same goes for mobile devices. That's where you need like this alarm system, laser beams. If someone is on your house, laser beams fire up and detect it. That is what Jamf Executive Threat Protection is doing. As soon as someone gets onto the device, it alerts you of that and it protects you against that. Does everyone need an alarm system and laser beams in their house? Probably not. Does everyone? But certain individuals do, and that's kind of the point with Jamf Executive Threat Protection. So hopefully that's made it a little bit clearer in terms of why you might need one product alongside another mobile security product. So that is pretty much my summary. I'll hand it over to my colleagues to kind of pick up the conversation.
Thank you very much, Adam. I just sent, minä juuri laitoin tuonne chattiin vähän linkkejä, mitä voi sitten käydä katsomassa näistä äskettäin näytetyistä tuotteista. Mutta annetaan seuraavaksi puheenvuoro sitten Akimatille.
Joo, vielä kerran oikein hyvää huomenta kaikille myös omasta puolesta. Aki-Matti Katainen nimi ja tällä hetkellä vedän meillä Atealla tietoturvaliiketoimintaa virkaa tekevänä. Ja tänään tosissaan, thank you Adam for the great presentation, mutta jatketaan vielä vähän pienenä yhteenvetona kotimaisella nyt, että oikeasti minkälaisista aiheista on kysymys, mitä Suomessa tällä hetkellä tapahtuu, mitä Atea tietoturvatalalla tänä päivänä on ja miten voidaan olla sitten teillekin mahdollisesti avuksi. Heitetään tuosta nopeasti kelmut esille, niin nyt varmaan jotain sieltä näkyy.
Joo, kyllä.
Ylätasolla ajattelin ihan kertoa nyt, että miten meillä tällä hetkellä siis Suomessa menee, ja valitettavasti ei ehkä tällä hetkellä parhaalla mahdollisella tavalla. Jos isommassa kuvassa ajatellaan ei pelkästään mobiililaitteisiin kohdistuvia uhkia sinänsä, vaan isossa kuvassa, niin viimeisimmät esimerkit esimerkiksi palveluestohyökkäyksistä tällä hetkellä reilu viikko sitten, niitä tapahtui yli 50 kappaletta, ja siellä oli muutamia hyökkääviä osapuolia, joista ainakin No Name-merkkinen ryhmittymä osoittaa hyvin voimakkaasti meitä tuonne tällä hetkellä idän suuntaan. Siellä oli Suomessa isojakin kaupunkeja, oli lentokenttiä, oli merkittävän kokoisia suomalaisia yrityksiä käytännössä kohteena. Palveluestohyökkäyksillä ehkä sinänsä haetaan enemmän tällaista harmia ja tavallaan näkyvyyttä sille kuin, että vaarannettaisiin ihan aidosti järjestelmiä tai mitään kriittistä, mutta joka tapauksessa aktiviteetti on merkittävästi kohonnut. Huijausyrityksiä on edelleen tosi paljon liikenteessä. Kyberturvallisuuskeskuksen viimeisen kybersään mukaan niin on ollut tosi paljon itse asiassa. On ollut huijauspuheluyrityksiä, on ollut huijausviestiä, ne on tullut SMS-nä, tekstiviesteinä, on ollut tietojen kalastelua, käytetty hyvin paljon, on vero.fiitä, on ollut S-pankkia, on ollut postia, eli hyvin luotettavan, uskottavan näköisiä huijausyrityksiä käytännössä, ja sitä kautta ollaan lähdetty etenemään. Suomalaiset itse asiassa 24 vuonna, jos puhutaan yksilötasolla, niin menetti lähes 100 miljoonaa euroa rahaa, ja käytännössä vuoden takaiseen tilanteeseen verrattuna se on yli 70% nousu, ja tämä tavallaan ajaa meitä sellaiseen tilanteeseen, jossa myös sen henkilökohtaisen oman tavallaan tietosuojan ja yksityisyyden suojaaminen on tärkeää, mutta sitten taas mobiililaitteiden näkökulmasta myös se yrityspuoli ja tavallaan se kriittisen liiketoimintatiedon suojeleminen tulee sitä kautta aika lailla keskiöön. Tietomurrot, vuodot, esimerkiksi Microsoft M365 on ollut edelleen tiettyjen tavallaan hyökkäävien tahojen suosion keskipisteenä, ollaan tämmöistä adversary in the middle-tyyppistä taktiikkaa aika paljon käytetty, eli esimerkiksi Akira-ryhmittymä on edelleen aika lailla ollut aktiivinen ja myös Suomessa saanut aika paljon pahaa aikaa. Lisäksi tuo toimitusketjupuoli ja varsinkin tälleen nyt kun uusi laki kyberturvallisuudesta astui voimaan tuossa 8. päivä tätä kuuta, niin myös tuo toimitusketjupuoli käytännössä korostuu sitä puolta. Toimitusketjut on ollut tällä hetkellä myös sitten Kiinan vakoilun kohteen. Semmoisia sieltä löytyy. No mikä sitä oikeasti niitä rikollisia tällä hetkellä motivoi, niin se vastaus löytyykin tuosta kuvasta. Eli kyllä se aina jollain tavalla kyse on kuitenkin loppupeleissä siitä rahasta. On se sitten murtautumalla järjestelmiin, kryptaamalla jotain teidän liiketoimintatietoa, vaatimalla siitä lunnaita tai sitten ihan henkilökohtaisen tiedon tavallaan vaarantuminen. Esimerkiksi Case Vastaamo nyt Suomen tasolla muutama vuosi takaperin. Tavallaan pyydettiin lunnaita siitä, että ei paljasteta jonkun yksilön henkilökohtaista tietoa. Ja tämä tavallaan ohjaa meitä siihen suuntaan, että kun ne mobiililaitteet tosissaan on, niin kuin aikaisemmin jo todettu, tosi vahvasti sitä osaamista työntekoa meillä tänä päivänä. Meillä on palaverit, pidetään puhelut, meillä on yhteistyöalustat, kaikki kollaboraatio, tämän tyyppiset työkalut. Meillä on puhelin siellä joka tapauksessa aina mukana. Nykyään myös jotain muuta, ne voi olla älykelloja tai mitä, niin mekin ollaan huomattu, siis mäkin olen ollut varmaan sadoissa, ellei jopa tuhansissa asiakaskeisseissä mukana niin sanotusti tässä vuosien varrella, ja kyllä tavallaan havainnut sieltä kentältä niin on sitä, että liian harvoin ne mobiililaitteet ensinnäkin on kunnolla hallinnassa, tai sitten siellä ei välttämättä ole kovinkaan hyvä se tietoturvan taso, tai ei ole riittäviä komponentteja vastaamaan niihin uhkiin, joita tänä päivänä oikeasti tuolla nähdään. Et varsinkin se arkaluonteisen tiedon käsittely ja se henkilökohtainen tieto tavallaan ajaa sinne suuntaan. No kertauksena vielä, siis tapojahan on monia, miten niitä hyökkäyksiä voidaan tehdä, miten siihen häräsilmään osutaan sen pahuuden harrastajan toimesta. Meillä on oikeasti niitä kalasteluhyökkäyksiä edelleen tosi paljon. On sitä tekstiviestipohjaista kalastelua tai sitä QR-koodipohjaista kalastelua, eli phishingia, mistä puhe olikin tosiaan aikaisemmin. Ja tästä esimerkkinä esimerkiksi nyt se pankkitunnuskalastelu tuolla verotusteemalla oli ihan vastikään, mikä kierti täällä Suomessa. Tavallaan kun se pystytään se jalansijan siihen laitteeseen saavuttamaan, pystytään pystytään asentamaan sinne sitten jotain pahuutta sisältävää ohjelmistoa, on se sitten tämmöisen niin kuin laittoman tavallaan jakelukanavan kautta tai mikä ikinä se tapa onkaan, mutta ylipäätään se pahuus asuu sillä koneella. Tai sitten käytetään näitä hyökkäystapoja, joissa sitten oikeasti niin kuin ohjataan käyttäjä vaikka kirjautumisruudultaan aidolta näyttävään kirjautumiseen, ja käytännössä pystytään siinä yhteydessä käyttäjän omat tunnukset syöttäessään varastamaan esimerkiksi sessio tämmöinen niin kuin eväste tai cookie siitä välistä, jolla pystytään sitten niin kuin käyttäjän huomaamatta kuitenkin kirjautumaan hänen sähköpostinsa, esimerkiksi vaarantamaan tieto, luomaan sieltä käytännössä uudelleen lähetysprofiilit ja niin edelleen. Tai sitten käytetään vaikka näitä avoimia suojaamattomia langattomia verkkoja. Hyvänä esimerkkinä just vaikka lentokentät tai muut, niin käytännössä niin kuin ne on siellä tapoja. Tai että edelleen se salasanapolitiikka meillä on vähän köykäinen, on huonoja salasanoja olemassa niin kuin käyttäjätileille. Mobiililaitteilla totta kai, kun on PIN-koodia, on biometristä tunnistautumista, niin tilanne on pikkusen parempi. Ja sitten on oikeastaan tämä niin kuin vahvan tunnistautumisen puoli, joka niin kuin ihan perus tämmöisenä niin kuin käyttöönottona enää ei ole riittävä, vaan tarvitaan nimenomaan niin kuin lisää siihen. Eli puhutaan tämmöisestä väsytyshyökkäyksestä, jossa käyttäjälle sitten laitetaan niin kuin huittauspyyntöjä niin paljon sen yhteyden ottamiseen, kunnes hän jossain vaiheessa vaan sanoo sille herätteille, että kyllä näin on, voit ottaa yhteyttä, ja sen jälkeen luetaankin todennäköisesti jo jotain ehkä lehdestä. Tai sitten on näitä konfiguraatiovirheitä, ja hyvänä esimerkkinä, mitä Adam nosti aikaisemmin, oli tämä niin kuin tiettyjen henkilöiden joko korkeassa asemissa olemien tai muuton esimerkiksi valtiollisia tahoja kiinnostavien henkilöiden maalittaminen, niin myös niin kuin on hyvä huomioida, pitää ehkä korvan takana se, että ne ihmiset, joilla on hyvin arkaluonteiseen tietoon pääsyä, on jollain tavalla muuten kiinnostavia, esimerkiksi valtiollisten toimijoiden, vaikka journalistit, toimittajat, tämän tyyppiset hahmot, niin on ehkä niin kuin syytä kiinnittää vielä siihen niin kuin lisää huomiota. Ja ehkä nyt sitten vielä tämmöisenä niin kuin nostona, että muistetaan nyt ainakin nämä asiat, eli on se tapa mikä tahansa, on se teknologia nyt mikä tahansa, hyvänä esimerkkinä Jamfi, on se sitten Microsoftin Intune tai mitä ikinä, hallitaan ne laitteet. On ne sitten niin kuin yrityksen omassa omistuksessa olevia, tai on ne sitten nämä bring your own device-tyyppisiä ratkaisuja, että saadaan oikeasti sieltä käyttäjältä kryptottua ne niin kuin omat osiot, ja sitten on taas se niin kuin yritystoimintaan käytettävä puoli olemassa, mutta ilman tavallaan sitä hallintaa, niin me ei saada näkyvyyttä sinne, me ei pystytä tunnistamaan niitä uhkia, ja sitä kautta niin ei pystytä myöskään varmistumaan siitä, että meillä on oikeat kontrollit siellä paikallaan. Ja sitten puhuttiin niistä, että käyttöjärjestelmissä on havaittu paljon niitä päivityksiä, puuttuu kriittiset tietoturvapäivitykset, niiden asentaminen on ollut vähän niin kuin retuperällä. No, ne on laitettava oikeasti kuntoon, ja se on hyvä tapa esimerkiksi tällä keskitytyllä hallintotyökalulla hoitaa. Ilmaista teknologiaa, niin me ollaan vaan oikeasti siellä niin kuin parhaan arvauksen varassa, että ei meidän tietoa pääse vaarautumaan. Myös tuonne mobiililaitepuolelle meillä on hyvä niin kuin luoda semmoinen niin kuin politiikka. Puhutaan ehkä tämmöisestä baselineista, että mitkä asetukset ainakin meidän on otettava huomioon, kun mobiililaitteilla käsitellään sitä yrityksen tietoa. Tämä tietysti auttaa meitä merkittävästi siellä pohjalla. Tämmöiseen niin monivaiheisen tunnistautumiseen ehdottomasti otetaan ne conditional accessit, eli ehdolliset pääsyhallintapolitiikat käyttöön. Se auttaa meitä niin kuin paljon varmistumaan myös siitä laitteen terveydentilasta ennen kuin päästetään ja luvitetaan johonkin resurssiin käsiksi ja niin edelleen. Identiteetin suojaus ylipäätään sekä on se taktiikka mikä tahansa, jos käytetään sosiaalista hakkerointia tai jotain muuta, niin se, että meillä on identiteetin suojaukseen ja pääsyhallintaan liittyvät komponentit kunnossa. Ja Zero Trust edelleen nostetaan tässä niin kuin esimerkiksi aina oletetaan, että hyökkäys on jo tapahtunut, aina verifioidaan joka pisteessä tavalla, että meillä on päätelaite semmoinen, millä me voidaan tulla. Meillä on oikeus identiteetin ja käyttöoikeusvaltuutuksen tai hallinnan mukaan käyttää ja päästä siihen resurssiin kiinni, mihin me ollaan yrittämässä ja niin edelleen. Varmistetaan joka tavallaan siinä verkon solmukohdassa siitä, että näin oikeasti on. Ja sitten siihen arkaluonteisen tiedon käsittelyyn kiinnitetään sitä erityistä huomiota. Siinä on oikeastaan ne teesit tai prinsiipit, millä kannattaa niin kuin tänään lähteä eteenpäin. Mitä Atea tänä päivänä tietoturvakumppanina on, niin meillä on oikeasti aika iso toimija. Meillä on tällä hetkellä yli 300 tietoturvakonsulttia pelkästään taloudessa. Hyvin voimakkaasti on sertifiointia eri eri valmistajien teknologioihin, eli vahvat teknologiakumppanuudet meillä on, mukaan lukien Jamfi on niin siellä meillä tällä hetkellä mukana, ja mehän ollaan niin kuin Pohjoismaiden johtava ICT-palvelutava tällä hetkellä jo 3. vai 4. vuotta peräkkäin myös maailman vastuullisin IT-palveluyritys. Eli semmoinen meillä niin kuin kannattaa pitää korvan takana, että meitä ei välttämättä tunnita isona tietoturvatalona, mutta meillä on kuitenkin niin todella laaja ja osaaminen ja todella leveät hartiat myös tuolla puolella. Ja miten me sitä hommaa tehdään? Meillä on tosi paljon erilaisia analyysituotteita eri kohtaan sitä tietoturvaa, on se sitten mobiililaitetta, on se sitten pilviratkaisuja, on se sitä infran suojaamista, verkkoa tai jotain muuta, niin me pystytään varmistumaan siitä teidän nykytilasta, toimittamaan niistä aika kattavat kuvaukset, raportoinnit, tiekartat sille kehitykselle, että kuinka me nähdään niin kuin meidän asiantuntemuksen avulla, että missä ne mahdolliset kehityskohteet tällä hetkellä on. Huomioiden totta kai myös sitten niin kuin regulaatio ja varsinkin lainsäädäntö, mikä nyt sitten Suomenkin osalta toissa viikolla astui sitten voimaan tuo kyberturvallisuuslaki. Suunnittelukehitysvöydällä meillä tehdään hyvin paljon asioita, on ne sitten resilienssin parantamista, liiketoiminnan jatkuvuuden huomioimista, tiedon suojaamista tänä hetkellä. Puhutaan siitä tosi paljon muun muassa sitten generatiivisen niin kuin tekoälyn käyttöönottojen yhteydessä ja tämän tyyppisissä hankkeissa, niin myös se, että me ollaan suojeltu se liiketoiminnan kannalta kriittinen tieto, eli tavallaan se raakaöljy siellä pohjalla, niin myös sinne löytyy tosi paljon sitten sieltä meiltä osaamista, ja meidän avulta sitten on se teknologia, mikä vaan käytännössä, mitä meidän niin kuin kumppaneistakin löytyy, niin pystytään sitten ottamaan teknologia käyttöön, varmistumaan niistä parhaiden käytäntöjen mukaisista konfiguraatioista ja lähteä siitä hommaa viemään eteenpäin. Ja sitten se viimeinen puoli on tietysti se niin kuin operointi, jatkuva palvelukerros, on se sitten tietoturvan proaktiivista kehittämistä, on se valvontaa, reagointia, on se esimerkiksi varmistuksista ja palautumiskyvykkyystä varmistamista tai niin edelleen, niin myös se puoli löytyy meillä tällä hetkellä. Ja sitten myös tuommoista niin kuin konsultointipalvelua hyvin voimakkaasti ihan projektiluontoisesti kyllä tehdään. Eli isossa kuvassa näin on, että meistä saa kyllä myös tietoturvan osalta todella hyvän kumppanin siihen omaan toimintaan eteen. Siinä ehkä yhteenvetona nopeasti. Katoin, että meillä on enää muutama minuutti tiimalasissa niin sanotusti aikaa, ja jos Simon haluaa vetää tämän aamun vielä yhteen, niin omasta puolestani lausun kiitokset tässä vaiheessa.
Kiitos Aki-Matti, ja laitan vielä tuosta tärkeimmän slaidin, eli tietysti näistä tuotteista, mistä puhuttiin, niin tuossa ensimmäisenä tuotte, jos halutaan ihan hallitakin Applen mobiililaitteita Jamfin kautta, niin sekin onnistuu sisältäen nuo tietoturvatuotteet, mutta sitten tämä päätuote, mistä puhuttiin, eli mobiililaitteiden tietoturva, niin tuossa näkyy tuo OVH-hinta, eli se on 54 € vuodessa per laite sitten. Ja jos nyt on yhtään kysymyksiä, niin kirjoitinkin tuohon chattiin, että voit tosiaan kirjoittaa sinne, mutta jos sattuu, että organisaatiosi estää tuon chatin käytön, niin voit sitten viitata sieltä, niin annetaan sulle mahdollisuus sitten ihan kysyä ääneen. Mutta jos ei satu tulemaan kysymyksiä, niin meillä on tietysti myös valmiinakin täällä vielä yksi kysymys, mihin ainakin itse haluaisin vastauksen, niin katsotaan tuossa. So not any questions yet, but one question I got, Adam, during your presentation was you mentioned about Intune integration and you mentioned also about how you can manage Apple devices through Jamf's own tools, but what about support for Android management?
Yeah, funny you should say that. I can't disclose too much at this date, but yeah, just kind of watch this space. We are exploring. Because as you mentioned, all of our security software runs on Android as it does on iOS. We don't currently offer management functionality for Android, but what I'd say is watch this space on that one.
Okay, thanks for that. Still, if there are any questions, no questions yet in the chat. Jos on kysymyksiä, niin saa laittaa tai viitata. Tässä on vielä 1,5 minuuttia aikaa, niin vielä ehditään käsittelemään, jos tulee. You also mentioned, if somebody's writing, I'll ask another question. You mentioned about the integration with Intune, and that's of course done, and you work closely with Microsoft. Anything more? Is it easy to integrate with Intune, the Jamf security part, or?
Yeah, very easy. We have a lot of you can integrate directly just the security part with the Intune console. We do also have integration to Microsoft's conditional access policies or the MAM policies that you can set up. But yeah, deploying and integrating with Intune takes a matter of minutes. It's a very simple process. You can deploy to thousands of devices, like I said, within minutes through this integration. So it's something our product team spent a lot of time focusing on and continue to. So very simple integration.
Yeah. Thank you, Adam. No questions, ei kysymyksiä. Kiitetään kaikkia osallistumisesta. Tärkeä asia. Lähtekää pohtiin siellä, että miten teidän mobiilitietoturva laitetaan kuntoon ja pyytäkää meiltä apua. Voidaan järjestää Janfikin kanssa palaveria teidän suuntaan, jos haluatte. Ja kiitos paljon osallistumisesta ja mukavaa keskiviikkopäivää kaikille. Thank you everybody for attending.
Kiitoksia.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Moi.